Okay, perhaps we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like perhaps there's some recording that has been started. I'm George Benson. I'm chairman of the management department here at UTA. I'm a former director of the HR program, and I'm very pleased to welcome three panelists here today to talk about HR and D&I. I particularly want to thank Mary Beth Finley for organizing this session and all the Business Week sessions for bringing folks to campus and virtually. Thank you very much, Mary Beth. As we go through the session, we've got three wonderful panelists. We want to give them an opportunity to talk, but I would invite everyone who's on the session today, particularly our students, to please raise your hand and ask questions as we go. And then I think that we'll have some time at the end for some questions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by asking folks to our panelists to give us a little bit more of an introduction. So we have Glynnis Swan from Microsoft Corporation, Nichole Sheridan from Lockheed, and Shunda Robinson from GM Financial. And can you guys just give us a little bit of your background and your current role? And we'll start with you, Glynnis.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Glynnis, and I am a HR Global Mobility Program Manager for Microsoft Corporation. In that role, I focus mainly on global mobility or talent mobility, as it's known in some organizations, which is the movement of talent across the world, and also domestic relocation here in the U.S. And I've been in that industry for about 17 years now. I had mostly the intern program in the US and globally, and I also manage the suppliers and vendors related to that program.
Thank you, Glennis.
Thank you.
Nichole, can you give us a little introduction?
Yes, sure can. So my name is Nichole Sheridan. I am a UT alum. I graduated with my undergrad in interdisciplinary studies and my master's in human resource management. I am a HR business partner at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. I support around 700 employees, specifically engineers, and I get to hire, fire, promote, investigate, and all the fancy things. So more than happy to be here.
Welcome back, Nichole. And then finally, Shunda, please give us a little introduction.
Good afternoon. Thank you, George. My name is Shunda Robinson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at GM Financial in downtown Fort Worth. Really excited to join you. I have spent majority of my career in HR, spent about 17, 18 years in HR before I moved over to DE&I. Stood up the function here at GM Financial and have been in this role almost 8 years now.
Very good.
Very excited to be here.
Well, thank you. And Shunda, we'll start with you with the first question. I'm going to ask both, what are your views on diversity and how would you define it? What would it mean to you? And we'll ask everyone. And then I'm going to follow up and ask about the inclusion part of D&I. So let's start with the diversity part.
Okay. So diversity really, just generally speaking, represents all that we bring to the table and to the organizations that we're a part of. Whether you're part of a university, whether you're part of a corporation, it's your lived experience, the variation, and all of the different dimensions that make you individually unique to who you are. It's so far beyond race and gender. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we've reduced it to just race and gender, but it's so much more than that. We all know that there's so many dimensions to us as individuals, so many different facets of our lives. And we bring all of that to the table. So it's really about the presence of the differences that we bring.
Thank you for that. Nichole, how about you? How would you define diversity? What does it mean for you?
I think just building off of that is the concept of identity is just so fascinating to me, and how different parts of ourselves become more salient depending on which situation we find ourselves in. So really just, I'm sure you have all heard this in your HR classes, but being able to bring your whole authentic self to work and recognizing all of the differences, and not necessarily why and how those differences make us different, but how we can work together to identify and learn from those differences.
Thank you very much. Glynnis, what is your definition of diversity? How do you operate and think about diversity?
So definitely everything that, my colleagues just stated, and just recognizing that different ideas and perspectives, generate better problem solving, and that working in diverse teams opens up dialogue and promotes creativity. It's especially important to me, being underrepresented, minority, female, first generation college student, also UTA alum class of 2003, and an immigrant to the U.S. So very important to me.
Thank you. What about the inclusion part now? So moving from our individual differences, and now they manifest through our identities and other personal aspects and at work, to the inclusion part. And perhaps we'll start with you, Glynnis, and we'll go back the other direction, which is how do you define inclusion in the workplace?
So actually, it's just acknowledging those differences in different people, diversity of thought, and seeking to understand those differences, and then being supportive and advocating, for yourself and for others with those differences. And overall, for me, it's like realizing, the power of engaging different perspectives in the workplace.
Very good. I like that. I like that a lot. Shunda, how would you define inclusion?
Yeah, so I love how I read an article last year on the NFL and their the infamous Rooney Rule.
Yeah.
And they talked about inclusion, diversity and inclusion, and how the NFL defines it. And I love it. And I took a piece of that and kind of morphed it into how we look at it at GM Financial. And the NFL says diversity is who's on the team, inclusion is who gets to play. And I think for us at GM Financial, it's diversity is who works here. So we've got a variety of backgrounds, lived experiences, racial makeup, ethnicities that make up the over 9,000 team members that we have globally. But the inclusion piece is, what do we do with the talent once they come to GM Financial? How are we engaging and including the talent that exists, whether it's through promotion, it's participating in different teams and different conversations and different decision making. So it's what we're doing with the talent once it shows up at the workplace. And I think any company can really think from that perspective of when you talk about inclusion, what value are you placing on the talent that exists within your organization?
Very good, thank you. Nichole, how do you define inclusion?
So building off what Shunda said is not only what you are doing with your talent, but listening to your talent and what they want to do with their career, and including their wants and needs and where they want to go in their career path, and making sure their wants, needs, values, and perspectives are included.
Very much. My next question has to do with kind of the current environment that we're all in around DEI in particular, and that is, what is so important about D&I today? D&I is having a bit of a moment over the last several years, has been largely positive, and now perhaps, we don't want to talk about politics, but perhaps it's being looked at in a different light in some quarters. And what do you think about now? Why now? And let me just get your reactions and all that. And we'll start with you, Nichole.
I think a big part is, as companies, we want to outreach, different clients or different, customers or things like that. And you can't necessarily outreach and reach all the people you want to reach if you're not including all of the different identities or different scenarios that they find themselves in. So you really want to look like your, external labor force. So I think that's a big part of it.
Thank you. So certainly the just demographics, it's a fact of life, right? So Shunda, how about you? What do you think about the current environment that makes D&I so important, such an important conversation?
Yeah, I hear some people saying, why now? And my question is, why not?
Yeah.
If we go back 3 years to 2020, we all experienced the very heinous public murder of George Floyd, and it really, really turned our country on its head in terms of race relations, race conversations, these uncomfortable conversations that we need to have just about race relations in general. And it really morphed and moved us into this movement of why aren't we talking about it? So you fast forward over the last 3 years, and now suddenly we're at this screeching halt where a lot of people are saying, okay, yeah, now we're tired of talking about that. And unfortunately, there are some of us that we can't get tired of talking about it or hearing about it because it's our everyday lived experience. We don't have the option of giving into the fatigue because it's prevalent in our society. So I think it's really about how do we ensure that the conversation remains effective and more focused on solutions rather than continuing to talk about the problems. We've identified the problems, and it
Yeah.
wasn't just in 2020. The problems were identified years ago, like
Yeah.
decades ago. But the question now is, now that we see this, and now that we've been talking more about it and we brought it to the forefront, where are the solutions, and what can those solutions be? It can't be this season of companies hiring ahead of DE&I, and then suddenly the DE&I fatigue sets in, and now they want to get rid of the resources that support the DE&I.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Like, we
Yeah.
don't have that option. We have to continue the conversation, as uncomfortable as it may be sometimes, and it's just as uncomfortable for Blacks, for Asians, for Hispanic as it is for anyone. So we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, let's turn off the faucet now, and then when another incident happens, then we turn it back on.
Yeah.
I don't think we should do that.
Some very interesting comments. I want to return to some of what you talked about, but I'd like to give Glynnis an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with everything that Shunda just said. When you first posed the question, why now? I'm thinking, true advocates of diversity and inclusion, we were thinking about this a long time ago. And of course, George Floyd incident brought that all to a head. But when we talk about D&I in terms of business, right, I think it all boils down to the bottom line, right? These businesses, these organizations, they wanted to, show solidarity, but at to what impact to its bottom line, right? There had to be some return on investment. So yeah, we created these D&I positions, so we could say, look at us, we're diversity and inclusion, blah, blah, blah. But the minute an initiative needs to be cut, it's usually D&I. We have these people in these positions, this person's now VP of D&I. We have this, brand new position, but do they really have a budget? Do they even have any authorization, or authority to do anything, or are they just there to check off a box? So that's what we're seeing now in 2023. People are tired of it, but like Shunda said, some of us, we can't just, wake up tomorrow and say, okay, D&I, that was just a phase. It's life.
Well, all three of you have kind of mentioned this notion of D&I fatigue, or the conversation, and I'm curious, either in your own organizations or with your diversity colleagues that you speak to in other corporations, are you seeing this in the corporate world, or is this mainly a public conversation, a political conversation, rather than something that's happening at work? And we'll start with Shunda. What do you think about that, Shunda?
No, it's real. Yeah, it is. It's real. And where it's being influenced from, I don't know. I can't pinpoint that. All I can do is respond to, what we're getting internally. I penned an article the end of 22 around DE&I fatigue, and really focused on how do we turn this not so positive narrative into something positive. And I wanted to really turn the corner on allyship. Those that are saying that they're experiencing this notion of DE&I fatigue. Oh my gosh, every time we look around, we're talking about this or we're talking about that. I mean, isn't it enough? But my question is, how can you help? Instead of saying that you're tired of it and you want it to go away, it doesn't directly impact me, or I'm good. How can you join the conversation and join the journey in a different way of advocating and being an ally. And that's been my challenge. And that's our focus for this year. It's around allyship, regardless of who you are, whether you're a white male or a Black female. Like, we all have some level of privilege that we carry. The question is, are you being honest about your level of privilege, and are you using it to help and benefit others that don't look like you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Nichole, have you experienced kind of diversity fatigue, and is it a conversation, and are you guys talking about the same things?
So I can share personally, they both called me out where I have the privilege and the option to check out if and when I want to, and I try to be cognizant, not to do so. And I think my job as an ally is to, sometimes it's my job to be quiet and not to say anything and just let them, different minorities, people of color, females, speak for themselves and speak to their own pain. And it's not my job to speak for them. So I think that's where my allyship has been growing, is it's my turn to be quiet sometimes.
It's very interesting. How about you, Glynnis?
So,
Have you experienced the D&I fatigue either at work or with your other colleagues and other
so,
other organizations?
so I am happy to report that, at my organization, there is a huge focus on D&I. There
Yeah.
are at a minimum of 40 dedicated full-time employees that make up, the D&I space. And of course, at Microsoft Corporation, it's 200,000 employees globally, so that's a lot. There is a big push behind it. I think that the importance is recognized that while people, may get tired of it, the impact and the effects of what may have happened, right? So things may have gotten better, a little better, or not, right? But there are things like mental health challenges, right, that have come because of microaggressions or things that people have suffered at work. I'm not going to lie. It's 2023. I work at a progressive company. I might still suffer, from some of those things. So there is no room for fatigue, right? It's not going to go away. I'm just fortunate that I work for a company that recognizes that and makes sure to provide resources, for everybody's issues, not just a Black female, but everyone.
Thank you for those comments. We have a comment in the chat from Laura talking about her personal experience and fatigue and the role of it, and how do you teach others. Let's move the conversation a little bit more to the practice of diversity within an organization. I'd like to talk about building teams, diverse teams, and all of you have mentioned the benefits of diverse teams, either on the bottom line or for efficiency and innovation within teams. Can you talk about some of the practices that you use to try to do that? And we'll start with you, Nichole.
So from an aeronautics perspective, Greg Carroll, our SVP, recently quoted in a Fortune story, we're reinforcing our talent pipeline beginning as early as 9th grade with internships, focusing on STEM and vocational scholarship programs, as well as university minority serving institutions that are in serving organizations. And just creating a talent pipeline with skills in emerging fields like AI, cybersecurity, 5G, and probably similarly with Microsoft and everyone else. We're seeing this new work-life balance, and like every single job can go remote, as well as flexible schedules and everything. So that's what we're doing from a corporation perspective. From an aeronautics, engineering, and technology perspective, about 3 years ago, my director and I spearheaded a executive inclusion mentoring program where we utilized our FAT data and goals that we did not meet for minorities, people of color, and females, and we paired those high-level individuals with executive mentors and really gave them a platform to help network and represent a business opportunity that they help solve. And so throughout that, in the last 3 years, we've had a significant amount of individuals who have been identified for promotions or stretch assignments just across engineering and technology. So I'm really proud of that program that we've implemented, and we're currently on year 3.
It's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Glynnis, how about you? What are the strategies that you use either in your current role or at Microsoft more generally to promote diverse teams?
Yeah, so at Microsoft, of course, generally they have, large programs, internship programs, pipelines for veterans and their spouses, and more recently, a big push towards neurodiversity and events, cater towards people who have divergent, ways of thinking. Specifically in my role, right, it's really interesting because my whole role is talent mobility. So, for years, even prior to Microsoft, I work with all cultures, all around the world every day. My immediate team we have about 17 people, and at least 10 of us are from different countries and
That's
work
great.
in different countries. So every day I'm working, I have my counterparts in South Africa, India, China, everywhere. So it's really, a really innovative melting pot. But I'm really proud of the internship program, that is my program for Microsoft. So I'm really, really proud of that. How do we get interns to these programs, right? Most of the internships are held at the headquarters, which is in Redmond, Washington. These interns have to get there, right? So I have to make sure that we have ways to effectively relocate them at little or no out-of-pocket cost to them, right? And then even relocating anyone in general, understanding that there are costs associated with that. They may not have the money up front, to put up front to relocate. So making sure that there are avenues for that. And also implementing that neurodiversity program, for the interns as well. So
Very good.
that's a
Thank you,
few of those
Glynnis.
things.
How about you, Shunda? Are there things that GM Financial initiatives in particular to build diverse teams there?
Yeah, I love what both Glynnis and Nichole mentioned, and in a variety of ways. They mentioned two of my favorite words. One is mentoring. I
Yep.
think that's so important. And the second one is intentionality. I think organizations really need to set an intention. Nothing great happens by accident. Like if you want to really make an impact, you have to proceed with intention. And, one thing about organizations having the ability to reach out across college campuses that don't have the resources. We partner with HBCUs and HSIs.
Mm.
UTA is one of our partners.
Yep.
To include, I wanted to go a level down to the sophomore level. Most intern programs really focus on that junior or senior, like students that are preparing to graduate or getting ready to graduate. But I did a little bit of research, and what I learned is a lot of first generation college students, particularly Black and Brown students, there is a higher dropout rate after the freshman year. And it's typically because the family was underprepared to send the student to college financially, emotionally. A lot of students will go away and they're at school with a level of guilt that they can't live with because they feel like they're needed at home to help financially or what have you. So I wanted us to create a program that really focuses on that sophomore student, that helps them with the level, increases their motivation to want to finish. So giving them exposure into organizations that a lot of them just haven't had the opportunity to get exposure into organizations. It's amazing to me. We're going into our 3rd year of our program, and we've met so many students, and they are like astonishingly surprised at the number of fields or jobs represented within GM Financial. Like we're not
Like
just a
what's available to
financial.
them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
it's so interesting that they're like, we have a legal team and we have accounting and we have HR and we have all these different teams that make up this organization, which most companies do, that they're again underexposed, just not aware of. a couple of our students have changed their majors going through the program, but this is what it's about. It's about exposure, but more importantly, it's about companies being intentional and saying,
Yep.
here's what we're going to do, and it's okay to set goals to do that.
Great. That's great. Do each of you want to give a plug for your programs and for our students on the line? What's the best way for them to find out about these internship programs and mentoring programs? Just go to the website or
yeah, ours is on our website. Yeah, we actually speak at UTA. We participated in the career, I guess the career development day, or participated in that, providing information.
Fairs,
yeah, we actually have a student joining us for our SLIP program this year from UTA.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nichole, how about Lockheed? If somebody's interested in an internship program at Lockheed, where would they go?
I would say reach out to your professors. They are there for a reason.
It's true.
Use your network.
Yes. Glynnis, do you want to give any advice?
Yes, Microsoft, their hiring process for interns starts at least 9 to 12 months prior. So if you want an internship for next summer, you need to start getting ready.
Now's the time.
Soon. Now is the time. Yes.
Yeah, very good. We have a question in the chat from Nicholas, and he stepping off of the how do you build diverse teams, he has a question about how do you go about promoting inclusion within those teams. So not just the people, but the actual inclusive environment. And we'll start with you, Glynnis. How would you go about promoting inclusion in your teams?
So that's a great question, right? I think that you need to start that process, early when you get a team together or you're bringing a new person into the team, right? So establishing, the structure and setting individual and group goals, right? To make sure that everyone, is aligned and on board. Having conversations, for collaboration, but also having one-on-one conversations with members of your team, because you may have an introverted person, right? I myself am quite introverted, and I work on a team of high performing, loud speaking, type A personality people. And sometimes it can be hard, to get your voice in, right? So as a leader, understanding, recognizing that and encouraging your team to understand and recognize, when someone may want to be heard, right? Making sure that everyone on the team has the time and the resources and dedicated space that they need, right? The tools that they need, to be successful, right? I'm going to use myself as an example because I don't want to, pick on other people, but everyone may not know, right? I have a visual disability. So there are some things that I may need, right? And I need to be able to be comfortable enough to share, with my team or, with the leader, of those accommodations that I need. I think that one of the most important things is to encourage and embrace failure, right? And when we use the F word, people don't want to be associated with failure, but that's one thing that, especially at Microsoft, they really value, right? They say fail fast, and fail hard and fail fast. When you fail, that means that you've tried something new, right? It also means that you've learned something new. So understanding that and helping your team to understand that it's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it, right? Try not to make that mistake again, right? But learn from it, I think also leads to inclusion.
So that safe environment for taking risks and yes, exactly. Thank you very much. Nichole, how about you? What's the discussion around promoting inclusion among engineers, aeronautics engineers at Lockheed look like?
So I think I want to take it kind of a step back and just his question is reminding me a lot of the next question, being a D&I advocate. And so I really want to go back to what Shunda was saying, being intentional. And I think the first thing you can do with being intentional is recognizing the language that you use and making sure that that language is inclusive. So for me, I did work on site for a period of time before the pandemic. And so a lot of my team members know that I do have a visible disability. I am a wheelchair user. But for those who didn't know me prior to when we all went remote, the language that you use on a daily basis, something like, hey, can you run this to ground? So now, with the team, it's like, oh, well, I'll roll that to ground or something like that. So just being intentional. And I think with me and Lockheed, we have something that's called assume positive intent. And so, generally, yes, there are exceptions, but recognizing that you're always in a learning environment. And if you always create and implement that learning environment, then you're always going to create that safe space that was mentioned earlier. And so just recognizing that little things, and when you take the word inclusion, you can, tackle it via race, tackle it gender. But if you take inclusion and start in little baby spots, like, okay, inclusion, well, let's take time zones. So if we're creating a meeting, we want to, be inclusive of time zones and make sure that, the West Coast isn't getting up at 5 a.m. and East Coast isn't having an 8 o'clock meeting. You want to be inclusive, whether it's generational differences or different job titles, an electrical engineer versus an aeronautical engineer. So just take inclusion as small steps before you try and tackle it, the big grand scheme ways.
Very good, thank you. Shunda, how about you? What does the inclusion conversation look like at GM Financial? You talked a little bit about your allyship initiatives. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it's it's creating the environment has to be right for it. So the question is, how do you get the environment right for that? We have what we call employee resource groups, ERGs. I've heard them referred to as business resource groups. And I think that's a really good way to start. And I was looking at the next question in the chat, and I think this is a way that you can at least non-threatening way to start the conversation around like-minded individuals wanting to do something impactful. So, for example, we have a women's ERG. We have one for working parents, which is probably the majority of our workforce. And we have one for generations, particularly for millennials and our Gen Z that are coming into the workforce. And it's really about starting the conversation for those particular groups. We know what the numbers look like. So if you can measure it and you can see it, then you can start it.
Yeah.
And I know we've got questions to talk about data around there, around DE&I. Data's huge. I mean, to me, that's like, it's gold. And you can use that to really enhance your business proposition, the value proposition for DE&I within your group, your organization, or what have you. But I think a small way that you can start is create some resource groups to really get the conversation going in a meaningful way.
Yeah, very well put. I want to ask him, we'll come back to the chat in a moment, the question around hiring and hiring challenges. And I both have a question about the biggest hiring challenges that you guys have right now, but I'm also interested in your perceptions. Oftentimes when we talk about diversity, when it comes to hiring, it comes to promotion, it's put in opposition to the notion of marriage, right? That somehow that these two things are in conflict, promoting merit within the organization and promoting diversity within the organization. And I'd just like to hear you comment a little bit about that. We'll talk, ask Shunda first.
Yeah, I really think the biggest challenge is confronting biases.
Yeah.
I think that's really where people want to shy away from the conversation because everyone wants to believe that, oh, I hired the best person.
Exactly. Yes.
But if we peel back the layers, ask some questions, did you really hire the best person, or you hired the person that you're most comfortable with? And did your bias wrap around that to say, oh, this is the best person? Because in reality is you're most comfortable with that person. But I think that's a conversation that we need to have more of, because I just think that people are afraid to, we all have biases. Like there's no way around it. If you're a human being walking and talking this earth, this planet, you have biases. Like you have issues and things that you're most comfortable with, dimensions that you gravitate to more. It's human nature. The question is, are we brave enough, and it takes courage, to confront ourselves and ask ourselves the hard questions. Is this being led from a bias, or am I thinking about this unbiased? And to include other people in the conversation. But I think the biggest challenge that we have around that is bias. And you notice I didn't say unconscious, because I think a lot of it is conscious.
Well put. Nichole, how about you, particularly in an environment, full of engineers and data folks? Yeah.
Yeah. So engineers love data. But I think for us in the hiring and promoting aspect is, for a formal L code position, HR is included in that leadership panel and interview panel. And my job as the HR business partner is to hear and mitigate the biases that the engineers have with, okay, well, I've worked with this guy for 30 years. He's a great guy. I was intimately aware of, the example that he said. And at that point in time, I believe it's my job as the HR business partner to say, well, I think you're bringing your bias and, how you know him. And this is not what I heard. And this is not what this does. So I think it's not only questioning your own bias, but we say at Lockheed Martin, see something, say something. So if you see something or you hear someone making some type of bias against one thing or another, take it as an educational moment. We call it growth mindset, and just say, hey, can you help me understand why you said X, Y, Z?
Well put. Thank you. Glynnis, how about you?
Yeah.
Same
Well,
question, particularly
definitely.
thinking about mobility assignments, right? People going to job opportunities.
Yes. And, so one of the biggest hiring challenges surrounding mobility, right, are think of like different family makeups. The typical expat and for those of you who don't know, the expats are people who go on assignments maybe to a country for a couple of years or so. Historically, the typical expat, right, was maybe a 40-something-year-old white male, right? And today, our workforce does not just look like that, right? We have, not just people from everywhere, but all different types of families. You mentioned earlier, about marriage, domestic partnerships, right? What is the partnership looking like? Who are we qualifying, right, as a partner? You have not only children, right, and spouses who work, but you have elderly parents who candidates, have to care for. And so if I say, hey, Joe, I want to hire you and I'm moving you to Singapore, right? Joe may want to bring, a partner, or want to bring his parents, or want to bring, his children who need special needs. And as an organization, we need to be, aware of all of those things that are involved, especially if it's sending someone to a country in which domestic partnership, right, is not recognized. That's like a whole nother, issue. So that's definitely one of the biggest challenges, in regards to mobility of talent.
For that. We have a question in the chat from Laura, and she says, how would you get buy-in for DREI in groups that are primarily homogenous? And I think this is related to my next question, which is kind of what kind of advice do you have for people that aspire to be D&I advocates within their own organizations or as HR professionals? And Glynnis, we'll start with you.
So this is a great question, right? Because I actually really got into D&I in 2008 when I worked at Deloitte, and that was when most of the organizations back then were starting to offshore and hire people primarily in lower cost countries like India and China. And I was placed on a team. I had a team of people that had to report to me, that I had to work with on a daily basis in India. And I was noticing like some communication issues, and sometimes they would say yes when they probably really meant no. And I think that's when I became, an advocate for D&I, because I realized that, okay, there are some differences going on. You know, coming from another country myself, I understand how there can be some differences in communication. But I didn't just look at it like, okay, I'm having a problem. How can I fix it? I thought maybe other people are having, you know, problems as well. And so I didn't know, I didn't realize that it was like diversity, called diversity at that time. But I remember taking a class in 2002 with Professor Bell, Diversity in Organizations.
That's great.
The class was interesting back then in 2002. Nobody was really talking about diversity, but hey, now I can put this like diversity thing into practice. So I don't even know if Google was around back then, but I searched on the internet, right? Diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw, you know, things come up on the internet, but what I did was reach out and network with local diversity organizations. So here in Texas, we have like the Texas Diversity Council that was founded in Houston. That became an invaluable resource to me. And I started attending those meetings. I wasn't a D&I professional, you know, at that time. I was just looking for a way to help bridge communication, right, and increase efficiency with my team, and realize that I could help my broader team and the organization, right? So it starts like that, right? That's how you can be an advocate. Network with people face to face, or you know, virtual sessions. You know, if possible, don't just trust everything you read on the internet, right? Talk to people who actually have those challenges in the organizations. Learn the best practices and take them back and apply them to your organizations.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you very much. Nichole, how about you? What advice do you have for folks that aspire to be D&I advocates in their own organizations or as HR professionals?
So exactly like Gladys just shared, you know, she took that scenario and while she was working it from, you know, a D&I perspective, she was just really trying to make communication efficient. So I think it's picking out where you can make little nuanced changes in your day-to-day working environment. For example, I got a minor in disability studies at UT Arlington. And one thing that we just automatically did in a lot of the minor classes is put subtitles on YouTube videos. I can't tell you how many people just randomly always have subtitles on now. But if you think about it, some people may not want to disclose that they are deaf or, hard of hearing. So just being inclusive, again, taking us to that definition, little changes that you can do in your daily, you know, staff meetings. So just taking it, again, baby steps by baby steps, because I think for me, I can get overwhelmed very quickly thinking about the grand scheme. But if I just do it step by step, it gets a little bit more manageable for me.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. Shunda, your advice.
I would just say start small. I think people want to, we're not here to boil the ocean. You want to make a difference where you are. So I say start small and let it take off organically. I think, you know, with the right intentions and, you know, partnering with the right internal resources, something great will happen. But, you know, realize that your journey is not someone else's journey, or someone else's journey is not your journey. And don't think that, oh, because we're not doing something grand or we don't have a chief diversity officer, we're not doing anything, because anybody can make a difference in this space.
So as I'm hearing all of you reflect on this, it's act like the change that you want to see, right? Number one, start small. Number three, get involved, right? Whether that's with the local D&I community or any place else. And then I think number four, it sounds like take Dr. Bell's class.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's very good. So I'd like to ask a little bit about, as we move away from this conversation to the last couple of questions. I want to ask you guys kind of about within your organization, the overall value proposition for DNI. And not that the normative part of diversity is not important, but there's also the business part of diversity. And I'll start with you, Shunda. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's something that continues to add value over
Yeah.
time. Um, we're a service oriented organization, but I can say that since we've had a DE&I strategy and initiative, since 2015,
Mhm.
it really causes us to look at how we do business with our customers. And I love what Nichole said. I think Glynnis even mentioned this about the neurodiversity,
Yeah.
like how our customers want to do business with us. If someone doesn't, and this is just a small example, but if someone doesn't want to call the company, make a way for them to make their payment online. If they don't want to, if they're not computer savvy, make it a way for them to call and make a payment without talking to a person. Like, make it easy, but give them diversity in their options. It can't just be one option. And that's just one small example, but it's everything from how we interact with our dealer community, ensuring our dealer community is representative of our customers.
Mhm.
We work with our parent company, GM, very closely. So ensuring that our values and our efforts are aligned, because the end result is how we interact and how we serve our customers. So it's the small things to think about, but I think it continues to reveal itself as you're going through your business practices. So
Yeah.
I think what's most important is when you are making those business decisions, that you have diversity represented at the table when those decisions are made. You can't make those decisions through one type of lens. So this
Mhm.
goes back to how diverse is your senior leadership? How diverse are those decision makers? So it's really ensuring that your company, and this is our motto, is our leadership is reflective of our employees, and our employees are reflective of our customers.
Very well put. Thank you very much. Glynis, how about you, particularly in your role as global mobility manager and thinking about diversity and international teams in particular? What's the value proposition?
So I think definitely, understanding where your organization or team, right, if we're just
Yeah.
going it down to that granular level, right, where they're at in their journey, right? Because diversity and inclusion means multiple things to multiple people. And, someone mentioned earlier about you don't have, I think it was Shunda, you don't have to do this grand thing, right, for it to be recognized as some big initiative, right? It starts on smaller levels, but it also hinges on authenticity, right? We can't make decisions, right, that we think that other people want. So that includes talking to the demographic, right? Surveying them, listening to that feedback, evaluating that feedback, and implementing programs that are going to work for your demographic while meeting, your goals. And talking about goals, how realistic are the goals, right? Are you saying we want to increase, women in tech by 50%
Yeah.
next year?
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you that's not gonna happen ever. Well, not this year, right? We have to realize there are going to be incremental changes, and we have to be accepting of that, and work towards that. So constantly evaluating and reevaluating those goals, right? Are the goals that you set 5 years ago, do they still make sense today, right? We've been through a whole pandemic, and one thing that we don't realize is that even though the pandemic, has only been about 2 or 3 years or so, we have gone through a whole generational shift in these last couple of years.
Yeah.
That's something that not many people, are addressing or realizing, right? So understanding those things, and also bottom line, understanding that DNI alone is not just a differentiator, right? Having a DNI program,
It's well put. Yeah.
everyone, DNI it's something that everybody has to have now,
Yeah.
right? it's just something that we all have to have. But it does not make your company, well versed in DNI just to say, I have a DNI strategy. I remember having a conversation with a CEO at one company, who I asked him about his, DNI strategy. He was like, oh yeah, we're, very diverse and inclusive. All of our employees watch a 30-minute video, every year, and they have to sign off. And I'm looking at him and saying, literally having a conversation, forcing your employees to watch a 30-minute DNI video once a year does not,
Great.
a diverse environment make, right?
Yes.
So being willing to have those conversations. I don't care if you're the CEO, I'm going to tell you if no one else tells you. So having those conversations.
Yes, thank you. That's great. Nichole, how about you? How do you go about reinforcing the D&I value proposition at Lockheed?
So I think for us, it really revolves around our cultural belief, and again, reiterating some themes throughout this conversation, being intentional. Just because you have these fancy buzzwords, or a chief diversity officer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're being intentional with the resources that you have. And so for us, our cultural beliefs, we just rebranded. It's about accelerating change and being courageous and having one team. Well, if you take each one of those, little by little, okay, well, how do we create one team? Well, we need to be courageous and ensure that we all feel comfortable bringing our authentic selves to work. Well, how do you do that? Okay, well, you create a, quote unquote safe space, a learning environment to fail forward, to make mistakes, and know that it's okay to make mistakes, because if you can't do that with your core team, then who can you do that with?
Yeah, well put. Thank you very much. I have one final question, and it's around data and analytics and numbers that you guys use in particular when thinking about diversity. But given the time that we have left, I would encourage anybody, if you have a question, either to raise your hand if you'd like to interact with the panel directly, turn on your camera, or put your question into the chat. So I'll continue with the last question, which is around the use of data to promote D&I within organizations. And what do you think the role of data and analytics are? And then I'm particularly interested, are there particular numbers that you guys pay attention to kind of indicate how you're doing in the D&I space? And perhaps Nichole, will start with you.
Yeah, so again, I can pinpoint, the exact program that we spearheaded 3 years ago. We took our functional affirmative action programs, what our goals were and what our historical numbers have been, and we saw a drop in not only people of color, but female representation going from levels 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. So then we honed into those specific levels and identified those key individuals. So, I mean, it was literally an Excel sheet of individuals who identified, as a minority or a female. And we took those names and, did different benchmarks and set different criteria to identify key individuals to participate in the executive mentoring. And again, we're on our 3rd year. We've probably, I think 50 was, and they're pretty relatively small cohorts as well. So they get that one-on-one exposure to the executive ELT members.
Great. Thank you very much. Glynnis, how about you? What's the role of data and analytics at Microsoft? And are there particular numbers that you pay close attention to?
Yes. So data is Microsoft runs off of data, right? There is a plethora of data, and it's one thing to have data, right? And it's another thing to know where to find this data and how to use this data, right? And I find that in a lot of organizations, you have data sitting places, right? And you don't use it. One of the things that I use, or that we look at really heavily, in our organization, especially in my role, is when we're recruiting interns, right? Yes, we want to look at the numbers of who we're recruiting, and yay, we have, X number of underrepresented interns, or, people from HBCUs, or, neurodivergent. But, we also look at those numbers of people who turned down an internship. And you may think people turned down internships at Microsoft. They do. And we look at that data and we want to know why. Why don't you want to work here? And so having those conversations, encouraging, we call them our closers, our recruiters, those ones that close the deal, encouraging them to have those conversations, right? To see why. And then I take that data and maybe revamp our policy or add some things, right, that would want to encourage people to want to take an internship. So for instance, if someone is saying, well, I can't afford, to pay to come or to do things like that, making sure that they're aware that we hear them and we support them. They may have a more competitive package somewhere else. So I'm going to benchmark and make sure that my package is more competitive than the next. So that's how I use that data, on a day-to-day basis.
Very good. Shunda, how about you?
Trying to get my mouse to move.
Okay, there we go.
I'm here. Yeah, I think, really to echo what both Nichole and Glynnis just said, I think data is key. The old adage, doesn't, if we don't measure it, it's not real.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what are organizations measuring? I know a lot of organizations, and I've heard this from other colleagues, they're afraid to look at the data because the data doesn't reflect the efforts that they're doing. But I promise you, if you're not looking at it and you're not measuring it, it's not going to change or it's not going to improve. And I also think that for companies, transparency is another thing. Is if we're going to measure it, why don't we be transparent about it and hold ourselves accountable to it? That's where the accountability piece comes in. We at GM Financial, we put out our annual DE&I report that gives basically our report card of how we're doing. We want to be accountable to our customers, to our candidates, to our employees, but more importantly to ourselves, and hold ourselves to a higher standard to ensure that by the year 2025 or 2030, that we reach a certain level that we are striving for. So I think it's really about start the measurement regardless of where you are, and watch the results come in.
Are there particular numbers in your DEI report that you think are really important, or perhaps there's one that you're really proud of? Like, what's a metric that you would choose?
Yeah, we measure. So we measure across the organization. So we look at gender, we look at ethnicity, we look at generation. We also look at, as Glynnis stated, we look at internal talent mobility. We look at our leadership ranks and what that looks like. What's the makeup? We have an aggressive 2025 goal. We call it 45, 35 by 25, where we're trying to get 45% women, 35% professionals of color in our senior leadership positions by 2025. And that's what we hold ourselves to. So all roads lead to 40. That's a song around here. All roads lead to 45, 35 by 25. And our efforts are being intentional to help us get there. So we look at it from retention. We also look at retention numbers, turnover rate. We just did a engagement score. So, engagement surveys that we do, we look at those, we break those out by demographic. We want to know who's having a very different experience than another group. That tells us a lot. So there's a lot that we measure.
So we have a couple of comments. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one over. So you can definitely, look at the data and what the data tells you. But I think and I'm not sure about other organizations, but a lot of the information that we have at Lockheed is self-ID. So if you don't go in there and self-ID, your veteran status, your disability status, or your minority status, unfortunately, our data is only as good as the data that we get. So it really is up to the employees to flag that for us. So that way we can use that useful information.
Thank you. That's good to point out. We have a question in the chat from Laura about data on the financial benefits of diverse organizations. And perhaps, Laura, you can follow up with me directly. I'll send you some papers, but it's folks like Erica James and folks like Orlando Bouchard. There's some really good research on this stuff out there. The last question is from Eric, and he asks if you guys have any recommendations for either educational programs or good books that folks should read. Can you give a shout out to anything that you think is particularly important for people to pay attention to? Nichole, we'll start with you.
Only because I've been really terrible at reading, but I am going to call out, I think it's the 14th edition of Diversity in Organizations by Myrtle Bell.
That's right. Yes. And by the way, that's also a source for that research on the financial benefits as well. It's a fantastic. Myrtle is featuring prominently in our session today. Glynnis, how about you? Do you have any recommendations for educational programs or books that people should read?
I would definitely, for educational programs, from professional organizations, I'm going to advocate again for the Texas Diversity Council, right? It's right here in our backyard. It's a way to interact with D&I professionals right here in the Metroplex, right? I think that's an invaluable resource. And, that if I knew of this as a student, right, I don't think they just came about in 2008, so scratch that. I'm too old, but that's definitely something that
Just
I
put the
would
link in the chat.
leverage. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Shunda, we'll give the last word to you. Do you have any recommendations?
I just put a book, which is one of my favorites. It's called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Really good book. There's so many. There's a Harvard implicit bias test. So I know we talked a little bit about unconscious, conscious bias. And if you are wanting to
just Google it, it's out there.
Yeah. Understand your bias. Yeah. The Harvard implicit bias test is a good one.
Thank you so much. Well, this was a wonderful session. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day. Thank you very much to our panelists. That's fantastic. And thank you very much to Mary Beth for organizing this whole thing. And thanks to all of our participants for joining us. And if anybody wants to follow up directly, I'm sure that you can reach out on LinkedIn and find all of our participants here today. So thank you very much, guys. Mary Beth, do you have any parting words for us?
No, sir. Just everybody have a great day.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Thanks for participating. Bye, y'all. Thank you so much. This was great.
Bye.